All right. Hello, this is Mr. Ippolito. Thank you so much for your patience. Oh my goodness. Wow. I had a meeting that got out. Actually, it didn't even get out late. I had to finally leave the meeting. My dog is barking. Mr. Padilla, the link that I sent him, he can't access it. So I'm trying to, I think this is Mr. Padilla right now. And hello, Mr. Padilla. He's jumping in just a moment. Uh, and I think he is turning on his camera right now. Can't see you or hear you yet, Mr. Padilla. Oh, I see you now.
Whoa,
Hello, Mr. Padilla. Hey. Okay,
made
so
it
we started up 5 minutes late, but we are finally here.
better late
Uh
than
oh
never.
my oh my goodness. So to everyone who was patiently waiting, thank you so much. This is Mr. Padilla and Mr. Ippolito. I almost forgot my own name. My dog is going crazy. So much stuff happening. But we're very excited to have you here for the YouTube live exam review. This is for the Manifest Destiny unit. This is for the exam that if you're in period 2, you're taking tomorrow. And if you are in periods 4, 5, and 6, you're taking this on Wednesday, right?
Correct.
Wednesday? Okay, just making sure. Okay, so Mr. Padilla, I think the best way for us to go, and of course, I was just rushing in, so normally I have all of my documents and everything all ready to go, but I think what I'd like to do is I want to jump right in, and Mr. Padilla, I'm actually thinking that we start at the end on those questions at the end,
Hmm.
the essential questions, because
Yes.
I think that, and I'm going to open up the study guide in just a moment, because I think that that is going to help us kind of best focus our time that we have for. I will go ahead. I always promise an hour, so instead of stopping at 8 o'clock, I'll stop at 8:05 to make sure that I've given given students enough time to ask questions. First of all, um, if you are in the if you're in the chat,
Mhm.
I think I see Logan and I think I see Dakota. I'm not sure who the Chipmunk plays is. I'm not sure who some of these folks are. So if you want to go ahead and drop your name in the chat, I would love to give you a shout out. I will. So drop your first name in the chat, and once again, very happy to have you here. Also, want to remind folks, since we're talking about the chat, please make sure that you're asking class appropriate questions, school appropriate questions, test relevant questions, right? Because the last thing that we'd want to do is put you in timeout. That is a thing we can do in the YouTube chat. So hello, Phoenix, and I think that's Logan. And so hello, welcome to you both. Okay. So here's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. And of course, my dog did not want to go out 2 minutes ago, but now she does, but she's going to have to be patient. I'm going to go ahead and send
Time
the
out.
study
Uh,
guide. That is a thing we can do in the YouTube chat. So Mr. Padilla, do you have is was that audio? Was that our audio? Because we're on a little bit
Yeah,
of a delay.
I was opening up the stream just so I could see the chat as well.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you. So yes, so please, in addition to making sure you put your name in the chat, we would also love to see your questions in the chat as well. And like I said, going to get the study guide loaded and ready to go here so that I can cast this to my screen, and then I can screen share it, and then we can actually start looking at these questions.
Yes.
Once again, hoping that the technology works. And I think we are now in business. Let me go ahead and click screen share and share this. Mr. Padilla, can you now see my iPad with the study guide on it?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, then we're going to go ahead. Like I said, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and these are the questions that I want to spend a fair bit of time on, are these essential questions right here. So, Mr. Padilla, I want to go ahead and start off by talking about push-pull factors. First of all, Mr. Padilla, what are push and pull factors as they relate to what we've been learning about here in our Manifest Destiny unit?
Yeah, I think you had explained it well earlier today. It definitely depends on the group that we're talking about. But in general, we're talking about push means making like pushing someone out of their home or their town or some usually just like their home area, their hometown, home city. Whatever that reason it could be, it's usually economic opportunity. They're poor, or they just don't really like their living situation. They want to leave like their city or town.
Hmm.
Pull is why they're going to that other location. So maybe there's better economic opportunities, such as like a better job that's higher pay, or maybe they just have some type of goal that they can achieve in that location that they cannot achieve at their home location.
So, Mr. Padilla, for example, I'll throw out here the first one, the Mormons, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We learned about the Mormon Trail, right? They left Nauvoo, Illinois. The push factor, the major push factor, and by the way, Mr. Padilla, I'm going to set you up because I'm going to ask you push and pull factors for the 49ers once I'm ready to go let my dog outside. Uh, so, the push factors for the Mormons, right? The LDS, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the push factor for them was they were being persecuted because of their religious beliefs and religious practices. So that persecution, right? They were being treated, they were being threatened, acts of violence, and actually their leader Joseph Smith was even murdered, right? So that would be, that's a pretty big push factor. That pushed them out of their home in Nauvoo, Illinois, and they traveled along the Mormon Trail. And then the pull factor, what pulled them along the Mormon Trail, eventually leading to the Valley of the Great Salt Lake. And let me go ahead and there is the Great Salt Lake right there in what is today Utah. What led them there was the uh, that it was a place. The pull for them was they could kind of do their own thing, right? They could be out on their own. They didn't have to deal with any state laws or judgmental people who were judging their religious practices. They just had wide open spaces to kind of do their own thing. So those were the push and pull factors for the Mormons. I'm going to stop sharing really quickly because I want to reload this so I can actually draw on it. In the
Mhm.
meantime, Mr. Padilla, can you talk just push pull factors for the 49ers?
Yeah. So we're talking about the 49ers, we're not talking about the football team. We're talking about the gold rush, basically. When we have like people from the East, generally men, moving out to California due to the idea of there being gold in California. So when we're talking about pull factors, or sorry, push factors, we're talking about usually young men who likely didn't have that much money or didn't have a stable job or something along those lines, hearing about a faraway location where people are making it rich. So the push factor there is just these people usually were low income, so they wanted to find a new life, new job, income basically to start their new life. The pull factor there is gold. They hear about gold, they hear about someone discovering gold, and they hear about all these people that are rushing to California to be able to find this gold as quickly as possible before the well dries. Um, and and they go to California. And they're being pulled to California to try to find this gold. And as I kind of discussed with both my periods earlier today, there wasn't actually tons of people getting rich off gold. It was more so the business surrounding gold, the tools and the towns that were being popping up around these gold areas. So people were making money more so off the tools, less so off the gold. But yeah.
Mr. Padilla, thank you. The question came in. First of all, shout out to the students who are just joining us. Alessandro, thank you. Ryan, Eva, and then I'm not sure which student that is. Yeah, there are. But Alessandro asks, says, Mr. Ippolito, if we need a retake on this test, can we get 100% on that retake or just an 80? Pretty typical. Um, Oh, that's the wrong thing that I'm sharing there on my screen share. Um, Pretty typical, Mr. Padilla. Do you see the essential questions now? Do you see the study guide?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Just making sure. Um, very typical of other retakes where the highest you can get is an 80%. So definitely if you're taking the exam tomorrow or you're taking it Wednesday, you want to try to do your best on it the first time because the retake will be exclusively for students. It will only benefit students who got a C or below, right? Because the people who got a C or below would then have the opportunity on the retake to get up to, but not any higher than an 80%. And then Eva asks, does study guide questions, are they going to be on the exam? And the answer is absolutely yes, which is why Eva, we are Mr. Padilla and I are talking about them right now. So, Mr. Padilla, we already talked about the Mormons, right? The push and pull factors for the Mormons. We
Yes.
talked about the push and pull factors for the 49ers. You discussed those. Mr. Padilla, if you want to take Spanish missionaries right after, I'm going to take Oregon Trail. You good with that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about and we had this conversation earlier in either period 4 or period 5 class, Mr. Padilla,
Yes.
about people going to Oregon. Let's talk about three. I want to talk about three different groups that are going to Oregon. And by the way, there is a strong likelihood that these essential questions, this is why we're talking about these first, a strong likelihood that one or more of these will appear on your exam. So that's why I wanted to jump to these first, because if these end up being written response questions, free response questions, then you know that free response questions, those are worth the highest amount of points, right? Usually multiple choice questions worth 1 point. The map questions are each going to be worth 1 point, but usually written response, free response questions are worth 3, 4, or 5 points. So that's why I'm kind of slowing down and taking some time on the essential questions first, because these are much more likely. These, by the way, if you're just joining us, these are at the very end of your study guide, right? So on the back page at the bottom, these are those essential questions. The three groups that are traveling to Oregon, I'm just going to put OR because that is the 2-letter postal abbreviation for Oregon. The three groups that are traveling, we have missionaries, right? In other words, these are Christian missionaries. We have the mountain men. And then finally, we have families along the Oregon Trail. And pardon my, oh my goodness, you would think I would know how to spell families by now. Mr. Ippolito having some trouble. Okay, families along the Oregon Trail. Normally, I write much better than that, but so let's talk really quickly about push-pull factors for missionaries. Missionaries, like Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, for example, right? Because they were the first two permanent white settlers to like actually settle. We're not talking about Lewis and Clark. They just went and they traveled and they explored. We're talking about the first two like original white American settlers to like stay, try to make a home for themselves in Oregon. Missionaries, what's their push factor? Well, they look around. They look around where they are, whether it's Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, wherever they're coming from. And they're like, you know what? There are already Christians all around us. So we want to try to find a new place somewhere else that doesn't have a lot of Christians, because they are motivated to spread the word of God. They want to spread their Christian religion to other people who are not yet Christians. So that's the pull factor to Oregon is number one. It's a beautiful location. And I think that could be a pull factor for missionaries and mountain men and families along the Oregon Trail, right? But another big pull factor is the fact that who are they trying to convert? Who are they going to Oregon to try to convert? It's the Cayuse Indians and Native Americans and other, besides the Cayuse, other tribes as well that are in the Oregon territory, because they are, in their view, they're saving their souls, right? They are non-Christians. They are going to try to save their souls. And so push factor, looking around, seeing, well, we got pretty much Christianity. Everybody all around us are Christians. So let's go to a new place where there are non-Christians to try to convert them. Those are the push and pull factors. For the mountain men, similar to what Mr. Padilla called, I would say very similar to the 49ers, Mr. Padilla. These mountain men were also young. They were probably also back in their home places, maybe not a lot of economic opportunity for them. They're looking around. They don't have very high paying jobs, if jobs are available at all. So they're going to go out to the West. If they're adventurous, they're rugged. Um, you have to be of good physical condition, like hardy physical condition, because being a mountain man is exhausting physical labor. One of the things that they were doing is logging, but of course, one of the biggest things that they were doing, which we talked about in class, when I say logging, I mean like chopping down trees to make wood, right? But the biggest thing that they were doing, which we learned about in class, is the beaver furs, right? They were trapping beavers because those beaver furs were worth a lot of money. People, especially women on the East Coast, New York, Philadelphia, the socialites of Boston, they all want beaver fur coats and beaver fur wraps and beaver fur stoles and hats, and because it's a very warm material, and it is also a status symbol. So these mountain men are making a lot of money by trapping these beavers, killing the beavers, skinning them, taking their pelts, right, their beaver skins, their beaver furs, and then selling them to furriers on the East Coast who are turning them into these various things. Those are push pull factors for mountain men. And then finally, the push and pull factors for families along the Oregon Trail. Again, a push factor, I think, would be a lack of economic opportunity. And then, of course, a pull factor is there's all this beautiful farmland in Oregon. Perhaps they want to farm, but farmland is more expensive in where they're coming from. And so in Oregon and other places of the West, land is either cheap or free, right? It's very low cost, or they're literally giving away this land as an incentive to move out, as an incentive to settle out in the West. Okay. So, Mr. Padilla, we've talked about Mormons. We talked about the 49ers. We talked about three different groups traveling along the Oregon Trail. Spanish missionaries. What do you have?
Yeah, the Spanish missionaries is what was covered during the gallery walk. Similar to what you discussed about the missionaries going to Oregon. This happened. So we have Spanish missionaries essentially trying to spread Christianity, right? And they're kind of getting pushed out of Spain because 90%, 99% of Spain at the time was Christian or religious in some capacity, and then they hear about this in California that about these Native Americans, people that just do not believe, at least in Christianity, or they don't know the word of God, as they would say. And then we have Spanish missionaries that are essentially traveling to California, the California coast specifically, and attempting to build and spread the word of Christianity to these Native Americans.
So,
So
Mr. So, Mr. Padilla, if I'm hearing you correctly, and let's say, for example, let's say that this were a map question. I don't know if it's going to appear as a map question, but it might be a good map question.
yes,
Let's say that that were a map question. I know
yeah,
that Junipero Serra, his first mission was down here in San Diego. Like almost
correct.
all the missions were on the coast,
Yep.
and then you've got Carmel, and then you've got San Gabriel.
Mhm.
You've got San Fernando. So you start to see Ventura, Santa Barbara, Santa Ynez. Like you start to see this pattern of missions all along the California coast. So eventually there's kind of this chain of 21 missions that goes
Mhm.
all the way from San Diego up until I think the northernmost one is up here, like San Rafael, Tiburon, just north of San Francisco. So if that were a map question, and if the map question were like kind of chart the path of the Spanish missions that were, from the Spanish missionaries, that would probably look pretty accurate, would you say, Mr. Padilla?
I would definitely say yes. I would
Okay.
definitely say no that for the most part, the California missions are along the coast. They start in Southern California and move their way up to nearly Central California. And also, that's just a perfect segue to another pull factor. You may ask, why are they going on the California coast? Well, the coast is good to attract types of traders, right? Traders, as well as the amount of Native Americans that are also along the coast. So we had the reading discuss like this a cheap labor source to help them build these missions, build these farms, and maintain like their livelihood on the California coast. So push factor for Spanish missionaries is the spreading. They want to spread Christianity, and then pull factors is this abundance of cheap labor along the California coast, as well as spreading the message of Christianity.
Very good. And then finally, we're just going to wrap this up. And then there are a few questions that I want to get to in the chat. So thank you for your patience. Just the Texians, right? So we also learned about Texas in this unit. And so I think the push factor, very similar to those families that traveled along the Oregon Trail to Oregon, similar to the other groups that we talked about. I think a lack of economic opportunity, or perhaps a lack of affordable land where they were living. I would say for the most part, Mr. Padilla, that the people that were moving into Texas were mostly from the South. You remember that Davy Crockett was from Tennessee. Sam Houston also lived in Tennessee at one time. A lot of these people coming in from the South. The reason I know this is because many of them were bringing in enslaved people. And if you recall, Mexico outlawed slavery far before the United States did. And so these people who were immigrating from the United States into Mexican controlled Texas at the time, they were actually breaking Mexican law by doing that. And so I think that they were also drawn, they also wanted cheap land, right? Or free land. I think they were also motivated maybe in the same way that the Mormons were motivated to move out to the Valley of the Great Salt Lake. I think the Texians, these Americans who moved into Texas, were probably motivated just because they wanted to be left alone, right? They wanted wider open spaces. They wanted to be left alone. And certainly if you are using enslaved labor for growing crops, then you might encounter less interference, let's say, if you think that you're moving out to a different country and you're going to be, less regulated, or if they're getting the sense that perhaps the United States is becoming, more critical or opposed to slavery. That might have been a motivation as well. But if just to keep it simple, push pull factors for Texians, push, not a lack of availability of economic opportunity, a lack of availability of um, uh, land or low cost land. And then the pull factor was, uh, as we heard in the movie, right? Game, timber, land, great farmland, right? All of these selling points that Sam Houston was talking about at the beginning of the movie, The Alamo. Okay. Mr. Padilla, I'm going the wrong direction here. Before we move on to this next question, and you'll help me if I'm missing some of these. There's one question. Can you use the study guide on the exam? Earlier on, I had talked about that as a possibility. I do want to make it very clear that you will not be, this is not open note. You will not be able to use your study guide on the exam. And the number one reason why is because we are giving, like, basically, these questions that you're seeing right now are very similar to what you're going to see on the actual exam. So you can understand, like, I'm potentially possibly giving away test questions, right? And so for you to just be able to kind of write it in advance, hey mom, can you look at this, make sure this answer is good, and then you're just copying word for word, right? Like that's essentially like cheating on the test. So for that reason, for that number one reason, because I'm giving questions right here on the study guide that are so close to what's going to be on the exam. For that reason, I need you to study. I'm happy to let you prepare, but ultimately when you get to that test, you need to be able to know, right? You need to not just be able to copy down what was written previously, or maybe what ChatGPT kind of helped you generate, or mom or dad helped you generate. It's got to come from you, because you have to understand, because this study guide is so close to what the actual exam will be. So I hope that you understand that. And Mr. Padilla, other questions that we're seeing in the chat or things that we need to address?
Mm, one Vanya had asked what trails would she need to know for the map portion.
Oh, okay. And then, by the way, I'm not sure who you are, Chipmunk Plays, but you did ask about push and pull factors for Mormons, which we already previously talked about. So when the video concludes, you're welcome to just go ahead and rewind, and anything you may have missed, applies to everybody. Anything you may have missed, just go ahead and rewind, because we did already cover that. As far as trails go, I think for this map, and again, I can't, I can't give away everything, right? But I think, Mr. Padilla, one of the things that we talked about that was important, that I think you should know on the map, is the 49th parallel, right? We talked about the 49th parallel.
Mhm.
This is the dividing line when we were at conflict with Great Britain over what what was going to be, what line we were going to settle at, particularly for the Oregon territory, the Oregon country right here. We just settled on that 49th parallel. It's a line of latitude. It's a line of latitude on the map. And so this 49th parallel right here, this is the line that we peacefully agreed upon with Great Britain, because Oregon country at one time, Oregon country, we could have, it extends into what is British Columbia today. We could have fought, if we wanted to fight Britain for this land, all this land up here, we could have tried to fight them for it. But at the same time that we were arguing or having a disagreement over who owns what part of Oregon country, take a look at this year right here. Mr. Padilla, do you know which war was happening at the same time that we were having this conversation with
Mm,
Britain over Oregon? We
mm.
were going to war with another country. What country was that, Mr. Padilla?
Talking about Mexico.
Mexico. The Mexican War was starting at the exact same time. So could you imagine, like, we're fighting one war with Mexico over this territory right here, right? We're fighting over all this, but then we're simultaneously fighting another war with Great Britain over Oregon. So President James K. Polk said, you know what? We'll settle. We're going to settle this that way. Polk decided to concentrate all of his energy, all of the country's energy on just fighting one war on one border with, one opponent, and that was Mexico. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm starting to get some irrelevant. I'm not sure. So we're just going to put a user in timeout. And so this is just a reminder to please make sure that your discussion is relevant, because otherwise it just kind of clogs up it clogs up the chat. Mr. Padilla, what else are we seeing?
Yeah, a lot of them are asking about kind of the format of the test, like map questions, how many multiple choice, how many short answer responses.
Okay, so I think that, and then those are all fair questions. So, Mr. Padilla, you and I both looked at the exam.
Yes.
So I think we said that in total it's going to be 50 points total, right? It's an even
Yeah.
round 50 points. Of those 50 points, I want to say that 20 points are going to be written response, right? Free response, written response, short answer. So you're going to need to write like a paragraph. That's 20 points. And then I feel like, how many map questions did we see, Mr. Padilla?
I think a five, five.
Was it only 5 questions? 5 map questions?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay. So 5 points worth of map questions. And then that would then leave another 25 for multiple choice. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's close. And if we have time at the end, Mr. Padilla, just tell me. I'll go over to the other screen, not
Yes.
showing students the test, but I'll go over to my other screen and just verify that. But I think that's pretty close, right? So 20 points of written response. That if that's like 5 points each, then that would be 5 times 4 questions, 4 written response questions. 5 map. I felt like there were more map questions. I felt like it was more like 10 and 20, but I'll verify just in
Okay.
case. Okay. So, so Mr. Padilla, getting back here because like I said, I did want to focus our time on this. And Logan just asked, what are the push and pull factors for California missions? Logan, we did already talk about that. Just rewind when we're done so we can move forward and not move back. Mr. Padilla, I think we're ready now to talk about this next question here. The United States ratified the 19th Amendment, right? This is a time period in history you're actually going to learn about in 11th grade, but it connects to what we're learning about right now.
Yes.
Every woman in America in the United States got the right to vote in 1920. However, Wyoming gave women the right to vote back in 1869, over 50 years before women in places like New York, Massachusetts, or Pennsylvania could vote. In your opinion, why do you think the women of the West gained the right to vote so much faster? Now, Mr. Padilla, obviously, we don't want students quoting your opinion or my opinion,
Yeah.
but what are maybe some evidence that we could look at, and kind of guide them in a direction to help them find like where could they kind of find the information? We can kind of tease it a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, you can look, there's a couple places you can look, but for the most part, if we're talking specifically about the pioneer women, I would definitely read that document over. I would even consider looking back at some of maybe the Oregon Trail play and seeing what exactly the women in that are doing. Uh, and I think those are the only two that specifically deal with women. But definitely looking back at the play, seeing what the woman's role was, and then definitely looking over the pioneer women and seeing what exactly they were doing, how much maybe power they had specifically, what was their responsibility, stuff revolving around that, and then connecting that to why they maybe got the right to vote a little bit quicker than their Eastern half.
And then, Mr. Padilla, if students are really just kind of struggling, I do want to go ahead and kind of help them a little bit more. So I'm going to share. This is Google Classroom. It says period 2, but the Google Classrooms are the same for every class period. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Manifest Destiny full resources. One of the things that I've been sharing all quarter long so far since January, this document that has everything, right? Everything that we've done, this document has it all. So if we want to, I'm going to zoom back a little bit. So if we wanted to, for example, if a student is like, I don't remember one family, we're talking about one family's journey, right? We're talking about the story of the Appleton family. I don't remember that. I forgot I left mine. I lost it, whatever. Well, it's right here, right? You just scroll down One Family's Journey, and there's that PDF. You can reread that right there. The one that we're talking about that is super, super helpful, super important, Gold Rush Missions, Mormons, and Women. And so you could, there's the handout. We don't need the handout. We want the placard, right? So if I click there, then I'm going to find, and again, this is something we don't need to go through all of this in a study session because you can read. And as a matter of fact, you click here and I even annotated it, Mr. Padilla. I annotated it,
Mhm.
right? So, like, this is all good stuff right here. And if you want even more help, then you go back to this document and go, Mr. Here's Gold Rush Missions, Mormons, Women. You click here on this YouTube video. I'm going to mute it so that, and then I even put chapters in here. So you just click on Pioneer Women, and here is the Pioneer Women section, and I talk all about Pioneer Women. So rather than spending, I think this is probably a 7 or 8 minute section. Like, we don't need to go over this all over again. We
Yeah,
can just say, I think it's safe to say, as you mentioned, Mr. Padilla, just go back and reread this. If you didn't maybe read it carefully, or you felt like you were in a hurry or you were absent, whatever, take some
yeah,
time, go look at the placard right here, the Pioneer Women placard. Watch the video here where I have a pained look on my face. And invest 6 or 7 minutes where I talk all about Pioneer Women. It's going to be so super helpful for understanding and answering that question right there. Okay.
yes.
Uh, Mr. Padilla, I'm going to go ahead and have we seen anything else come up in the chat?
Uh, we just had one pop up right now. Someone asked, I don't know who that is, says Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
Why the Northerners opposed the Mexican War, which is a great question.
Yes. All right, Dr. King, an excellent question. The Northerners opposed the Mexican War for the reason that, many of you might be thinking, which is, and I will go ahead and reference, because I always want to tie it back to stuff we've already learned, right? This is not Mr. Ippolito, Mr. Padilla, like springing a surprise stuff on you. If you go back to primary sources, the Mexican War, a lot of this was about, and you can go into the primary source documents here. And I don't know why it's opening up in a little window there, but I really just wanted to, let's try this. There we go. So all of these primary sources are, and specifically, I would say biggest of all is that poem, The Mexican War is on behalf of slavery. The Mexican War is on behalf of slavery. Why did Northerners oppose the Mexican War? Why did Northerners oppose the admission of Texas into the Union? Why did they try to delay it for 9 years? It was because of slavery, right? Because some of the people in the North were morally opposed to slavery, right? They believed that slavery was evil, that slavery was wrong, that slavery was against God's law. But others just did not want the South to have more political power, right? So when you bring in the state of Texas, you're giving the South the slave power, more power in the Senate, more power in the House of Representatives. You're giving them greater representation in Congress. When you fight the Mexican War, if you recall from the poem, "The Mexican War is on behalf of slavery," James Russell Lowell, the poet, says, "You're gonna lug, right? You're bringing in California. Remember that, as so's to lug new slave states in. You're trying to fight for this land." This land. I'll go ahead and do another screen share here. This, Mr. Padilla, am I sharing my iPad again?
Yes.
Okay. So this is all and I'll kind of erase this here. This land right here, there was a fear. There was a great fear in during this time among the Northerners that this land right here that was being fought over, well, and it was to secure Texas, right? The Mexican War was to secure Texas, to hang on to it, to make sure Mexico didn't take it back, but then also for this land as well. So if you're from the north and there's no slavery up here in the north, making sure that I draw my line correctly. All these states up here in the north, these are what we call free states, right?
Mhm.
All free states. They do not want to give the South, right, the slave states, the slave owning states, they do not want to give them additional political power. And if you're adding, Texas was already added in 1845. If you potentially bring in additional states here, their fear is that this territory might become a slave state, that California might become a slave state. There was that fear that you're going to be adding additional slave states and giving them additional political power. So, to answer your question, why the Northerners opposed the Mexican War, that's why, because of slavery.
And this is
Okay.
a question
Yeah.
generally. I'm not even sure. The 3630 line, is that something they need to know for the test?
So the 3630 line is we're actually it's not anything that's going to be on this exam. The 3630 line was it's I can show you where the line is right here. This is let me just erase some of this here. This is the 3630 line right here. It is it basically it's from the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which we're going to learn about later when we start learning about like the road to the Civil War, right? It was an understanding the Missouri. I'm just going to abbreviate it here. Missouri Compromise line that basically said that if future slave state, excuse me, if future states are going to be brought into the United States, Missouri gets to be a slave state. That was the part of the compromise. Missouri gets to be a slave state, but anything else north with land that is brought in. It was specifically regarding the Louisiana Purchase. Uh, this has to be free. And then anything south of the Missouri Compromise line, 3630, that's brought in the future, this could be potentially open to slavery.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, the state of Louisiana, which is, will eventually become a state, that's going to become a slave state. This is Arkansas right here. That's going to become a slave state. But anything north, Kansas, Nebraska, um, the Dakotas, right? Like future land that's going to become states later in the future, that all has to be, there is no slavery allowed. That's not going to be on this test. It'll be on a future test.
Got it.
Okay. I see the question from Slim Shady, but I'm going to go ahead. I do want, because we still have these two other written essential questions that might be written response questions. And I want to make sure, Mr. Padilla, that we talk about these.
Yes.
Based on everything we have learned in this unit, what role did religion play in the westward expansion movement of the mid 1800s? Give specific examples of how religion, and specifically Christianity, shaped the settlement of the West. So again, we're not writing the answers for them, but
Yes.
Mr. Padilla, if you could give, if you're thinking of an example of who went to the West during this whole time period that we're studying,
Yeah.
motivated by religion, think of one example.
Yeah. I would definitely look at the gallery walk once again that we did in class last week. Talked about a couple of different examples of religious groups trying to basically spread their religion and expand west. Specifically, if you just want to look at the Mormon Trail, definitely reading up on that document and definitely watching the video of Mr. Ippolito summarizing it and giving annotations regarding it. If you want to look at the California missions, that also will do even though that was a little before the mid 1800s, it still kind of applies to our westward expansion idea.
I would
Um,
definitely, yeah, I'm going to just jump in right here and say the California missions, even though the California mission started in the late 1700s. It did extend into the 1800s, and I will definitely, those students who want to have as many examples as possible, I
yeah,
would definitely look to the California missions as an example, because that totally, right, those chain of missions, those churches, that settlement of California, that definitely influenced. That's definitely relevant here.
yes. And then
Okay.
you can even look at I think this was in an ed puzzle, but the mentioning of the or the Whitman uh,
Yep.
Marcus and Narcissa moving to Oregon County or traveling along the Oregon Trail to kind of spread their religion in Oregon to the natives. Definitely look at that example as well. I believe it's an ed puzzle, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then I had one more example in my head. What was it? But either way, those are three good examples of just religion attempts at trying to expand west due to religion itself.
Absolutely. Okay. Uh, Going to really quickly, uh, just gonna just need to take care of some moderation,
Yes.
and eh, we're doing a little bit of taunting about the 49ers. So
Yeah.
we don't, if people are 49ers fan, like let them just, we're now as it relates to the exam, we are just talking about the 49ers as they relate to the historical people, right? The
Yes.
the uh, the people in history who traveled to California in seek of gold, in search of gold, seeking gold, beginning in 1849. Okay, so I think we've cleaned up the chat a little bit, um, and Mr. Padilla, before we move on to the final essential question, I
Yes.
think I'm seeing from Slim Shady. I did tell Slim Shady that we were going to get back to that person. Can you tell us what we need to know for the map questions?
Yes.
I without giving too much away, I think we've already talked about quite a bit, and we talked about quite a bit in class. Mr. Padilla, we already talked about um, the Mormons settling in the Valley of the Great Salt Lake. We talked about that. So that's we talked about California missions, right? Like where those are. Definitely, we've talked about Mountain Men and Marcus and Narcissa Whitman and the Appleton family, and they all settled right. Oh, excuse me. That's I'm in Washington right now. I mean, that's part of Oregon territory. Oregon City, Oregon is kind of up here. So really, if you're talking about the Mountain Men, beaver trapping, for example, or if you're talking about um, the Appleton family, the end of the Oregon Trail. If you're talking about the Whitmans, it's all kind of in and around this area. If the test says put a red X, right? I'll get my red here. If it says put a red X where the Whitmans were, like put it somewhere around here, right? If it says where the Appletons ended their journey, put it somewhere around here. If it said where mountain men trapping beaver furs, I could say you could do a bigger X because it was a greater area, right? um so if you want full credit, you gotta know that the Appleton family, the Whitmans, the Mountain Men, they were all like in this same zone. um what else? We talked about Register of the Desert, right? Register of the Desert is, if that's going to be on the test, that's going to be somewhere here in this is the state of Wyoming, right? It's a different map. The map that's going to be on the test actually says Wyoming. So you want full credit. You got to put if the Register of the Desert appears on the test, you got to put somewhere in Wyoming, right? I'll give you half credit if you put it somewhere else on the Oregon Trail, but if you put it there, then that's definitely getting you half credit. If you put the Register of the Desert up in New York, then that's zero credit. And I weep. I weep for the state of education in Rim B5. Uh okay. Going to again just doing a little bit more moderation here. Uh okay. And keeping moving. Mr. Padilla, where were we? I think we've talked about. Is there anything else map wise we need to go over?
Um, Perhaps I think maybe yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely the Rio Grande and where
Yeah, for
that's
sure. So where the point of contention was the beginning of the Mexican War, where American blood was spilled on American soil. I want to say it was like right there. So you gotta it's like right there on the border because there was a dispute, right? There was a dispute. Was it on the Texas side? Was it on the Mexico side? We're still not sure to this day where American blood was spilled on American soil. Like we still don't know. Were we even justified in entering the Mexican-American War? Obviously we did. Congress agreed with President Polk that we
Yep.
should go. But we never really quite knew exactly. Did was it did American troops cross over into Mexico before the war started?
Mhm.
Did Mexican troops cross over into Texas before the war started? Like where exactly was American blood spilled on American soil? It's safe to say that it was somewhere around here. So if you just put that X right there on the Rio Grande, then I think you're in good shape.
Perfect.
Uh okay. So, and then the Alamo, in case you're wondering. So the Alamo is in San Antonio. I've been to San Antonio. I feel like it's right around here. It's right. I think it's right around there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think San Antonio's right. It's right in that zone there. It's right in like central Texas. So if there's a question on like where's the Alamo, that would be the answer to that.
Yep.
Okay. Um, So anyway, all right, let's go ahead and Again, we're just we're getting just some other like things that aren't relevant. And so I'm just trying to just trying to keep the chat relevant, right? Mr. Padilla, I think if we can't, I think this is a good time to go to the final question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Um, and I'm doing my best to slay. Thank you, Smirt. Uh, Based on what we have learned in this unit, why did the United States go to war with Mexico in 1846? And why were some Americans, like Massachusetts author James Russell Lowell and young Illinois Congressman Abraham Lincoln, opposed to the war? So I kind of feel like we already gave this away,
We did.
right? And so I will just say, without actually like coming right out and giving you the answer to this question, I would say I would refer you to there are really two documents, Mr. Padilla, if I'm correct, Mexican War primary sources.
Mhm.
And I think um and maybe even three, because I think you might want to look at the, you know what? I'm gonna back it up. There are four documents. There are four documents, all four of those in the Mexican War primary source packet, like the lesson that we did. All four of those are kind of telling us in a different way
Mhm.
why we went to war with Mexico,
Yep.
right? The manifest destiny. I think that's a factor. You should understand how manifest destiny was a factor in leading us to going to war with Mexico. That political cartoon, the way that Americans felt about Mexico, right? That kind of like that if you look at the posturing, right? You look at the cartoon with Sam Houston like towering tall and Santa Anna and General Cos, kind of bowing down below Sam Houston. I think that gives you some important information.
Yep.
The President James K. Polk speech, I think, gives some important information. And then finally the James Russell Lowell poem gives some good information about why the United States went to war with Mexico. And finally, I will say this, I'll do another screen share, and I will go back here to the Mexican War primary sources. Let me do a screen share here. And I will say this, if you want to look at the primary sources, they're right there. And if you're like, Mr. Ippolito, I don't want to do all that reading. Can you help me out? And I would say here, yes, I'll help you out. Here's a video right here where Mr. Ippolito explains primary sources of the Mexican War. And I boom, boom, boom. And so if you've got 18 minutes and you want my help explaining to you how why I think we went to war with Mexico in 1846 based on these primary sources, spend 18 minutes of time with this video if you don't already understand it. And I think you're going to get, um, it's going to, um, it's going to be very helpful for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. The question, will the map have state labels? I think we answered that. The question is yes. Yes, it will be. So if you're wondering what map will be on the test, it is going to be the exact same map as the map that we put in the practice, right? So if you go to formative.com, you can log on right now and you can see on the Manifest Destiny map practice questions, you can see exactly the same type of map. It's not going to be a different map. I promise you, it's the exact same map. Uh, okay. D D Oh, Nick, thank you. I'm so sorry, Nick. Uh, was slavery? Nick is like, please look at my question. Scroll back up. Was slavery a big influence to why many people went west? Mr. Padilla, your thoughts on was slavery um, a big influence as to why many people went west?
I would definitely say it played a role. Obviously, it depends on what group you're talking about. I'm guessing, Nick, your question's related to more of the Texian group. In which case, I would say that yes, for the most part, a lot of these people were moving west to kind of still have the ability to kind of expand the slavery institution and still use those slaves, knowing that Mexico made it illegal or had it slavery illegal in that territory. They were still willing to move there and use their slaves and have a battle over it and earn their independence to use those slaves in that Texas territory. Now, if you're talking about other areas of the West, like California, maybe less so, but I'm assuming you're referring to like the Texian territory.
Uh, Mr. Padilla, that was great. And again, yeah, I would say that you're talking about Oregon. I don't think I don't think slavery is even a factor moving to Oregon.
Yeah.
Um, that it kind of depends on which group you're talking about. The 49ers, I don't think that that was really an issue. These are primarily again the people who are moving west for uh, yeah, honestly, I feel like it's Texas and it's the Mexican War, right? That is the land that was being acquired in the South. I think that southern land,
Mhm.
I think that's the greater motivation that where slavery is a factor. Mormon Trail, not a factor at all.
No.
Oregon Territory, not a factor at all. 49ers going to seek out gold in the California Gold Rush, not a factor at all. So yeah. So a factor for Texas, a factor in going to war in the Mexican War. Other than that, I would say probably no.
Yep.
Um, another question, how close does it have to be correct for the map? And I think we spoke about this earlier, how close you have to be. I would say get as close as you can, right? You don't need to know precisely where the Alamo is. You put the if there's a question, where's the Alamo? If you put it somewhere in the middle of Texas, we're good. You know that it's somewhere in Texas. If you put the Alamo in Iowa, then you got nothing, right? So I would say similar to the Gold Rush. The Gold Rush, I think you should know that the Gold Rush is just inland of San Francisco, right? You need to know that the Gold Rush took place in Northern California. We learned that over and over again, just outside of Sacramento, which is here. I'll put the map back so we can be very clear. If this is a question on the test, let me make sure to share the correct screen. Can you see my map again, Mr. Padilla?
Yes.
Yeah, if it's a question, where's the California Gold Rush? Then if you put it down here in Southern California, right? Like that's close to where Rio Norte is. That's close to where we are. You've got to put the gold like it's there, right? This is San Francisco Bay right here. And so you go a little inland from San Francisco Bay, and that's where the gold rush took place. Now, if you just think Northern California, you put it up here, I'll give you credit. I'll give you full credit for that. You put it down here in Southern California, I'm giving you half credit. If you put the California Gold Rush in Pennsylvania, then it's zero credit, right? Like you gotta know there are levels. And so you get it really close or right on, full credit. You get it kind of close, I'll give you half credit. You get it nowhere close, and that's zero credit for those map questions. That's a great question. Okay. Uh, Mr. Padilla, did we answer all the questions?
Uh, I know someone had asked about question 4 on the study guide.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if we, yeah, because we still have some time. So I'll go back up and let me do my screen share again here. Now question 4 on the study guide. There's a question for Oregon country. Well, we'll answer all the question fours. Who were the first Americans to build permanent homes in Oregon country? Why were they are there? Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. They were Christian missionaries. They were there specifically to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. There was a big misunderstanding when they were not only bringing Christianity, but they were also bringing disease. And the Native Americans were like, "Yeah, we really don't want you here because you're getting us sick." And of course, the Whitmans and their fellow missionaries thought, oh, well, we're just spreading the word of God. Well, they were also spreading smallpox and other diseases. So eventually, those first Americans, Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, were murdered because they didn't get the hint and leave. Um, Okay, and then number 4, Texas. In what city is the Alamo? San Antonio. What was the Alamo used for over the years? As we learned about when we watched the movie, and we went over that study guide, it was used as well. It was used as a church. It was used as a fort. It was used, like a military, right? A military outpost. And then eventually, it's going to be used to kind of fort up and to defend the Texians who were trying to take a stand there at the Alamo against the Mexican army. Is there another number 4? Yeah. Who was Joseph Smith? He was the he was the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. He was he and his followers were persecuted for their beliefs and practices specifically. So one of the things they were persecuted for was the fact that they claimed that, and it is their belief, right? To this day, the Mormon Church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, believes that Jesus came back to North America, right? That what was the whole story of the Bible, right, with Jesus in the Holy Land. And then they believe that there is another gospel called the Book of Mormon, and that Jesus came back and spent time here in North America. So there were some Christians who were like, well, I believe this part, the Old and the New Testament of the Bible. I don't know about this testament. So that was one of the reasons why other Christians were like, well, and then the other thing that they were critical of was the practice of polygamy. Let me be very clear. The practice of polygamy is the taking of multiple wives, more than one wife. The church no longer practices that, right? That is not something that is part of their practices or beliefs today. But at the time, their belief was, that God said, go forth and multiply. They wanted to grow their community. They wanted to grow their group of faith. And so they believed that the way to do that was for these men who were the leaders of the church to take multiple 10, 20, 30, 40 wives or more and start families with them so that you could have more babies and grow the church. That was, I think, probably the biggest quarrel that other Americans had with them. And that was why they were threatening them with violence. Joseph Smith was murdered, right? Leader of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith, founder and leader, murdered in Illinois. And so Brigham Young took over leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They moved out west, and they essentially moved out west just so that they could escape religious persecution. They moved out to the Valley of the Great Salt Lake, in what is today Utah, just to escape this religious persecution. Uh, I think I answered multiple questions there, Mr. Padilla.
Yes.
I think that's all. I answered
Yes.
all the number fours.
I can
Okay.
shoot you some rapid fire questions if you want.
Yes.
We have, is there extra credit on the test?
No.
Are you collecting the study guide for extra credits?
So just to be clear, yes, I always, well, it's been my practice in the past, and I'm going to continue that practice to collect the study guide. I will give you credit for the study guide. It will serve as enrichment, right? In other words, it's going to be a grade in Infinite Campus. If you complete it and it looks like you did a good job on it, I'll give you full credit, 100% A plus on it. But if you don't complete the study guide, then there's no penalty, right? It will be optional.
And then finally, then students had already answered it for him.
Yeah.
But is the booklet a better source for studying or the study guide?
Well, I think the booklet is a source. I think the booklet is fun. If you spend 3 hours on the booklet, it's the same questions over and over again, right? So I think a much better use of your time is if you've already watched this video, like you've already invested an hour of time in this YouTube video, and Mr. Padilla and I have given you some guidance and direction on like here are some other things that you should look at. And, if these questions, this one, this one, this one, this one, if in fact these are going to be on the test as short answer questions, then we've been pretty specific on either here's what you need to include or this is what you need to look over again to make sure that you're ready for these 4 questions. So, I mean, play the booklet once or twice more, but don't spend hours and hours on the booklet when booklet is not going to help you with the written response at all. And this written response is going to be, just to be very clear, it is going to be, I believe, unless I got my math wrong, 40% of your exam is your written responses. So the fact that you invested this time tonight in listening to me and Mr. Padilla break these down, it's going to be extraordinarily helpful for you.
Yes.
So, okay.
And then I think this is the last one. They're asking if there's going to be any time to study before the test, I assume.
Oh, um, I usually give a little bit of time, but not too much. I mean, it's maybe like 5 or 10 minutes at the most.
Mhm.
But I try to give the majority of the time in class for actually taking the test. So I think that's the most helpful.
Perfect.
Uh, the answer on the screen. Okay, the chipmunk plays. You said, I'm trying to understand your question because I want to give you an honest and I want to give you a fair answer. I think you should put the answers on the screen, honestly, because you might tell us to study. But what if we get it wrong, then go off of what we put for the test? Hear me out, because that could make us fail. Mr. Padilla, I'm trying to understand because I want to try to help this student out, but I'm not sure exactly. Do you understand this question?
Mm, I thought it was maybe related to the Blooket question about the Blooket freezing, but I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay. The chipmunk plays, if you can clarify that, then that could be helpful. Will there be some things that are not on the study guide but are on the test? Mr. Padilla, you have looked like I've been doing this for a long time. You've seen it with very fresh eyes.
Yes.
You just looked at the test today. You've been immersed in the study guide. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for the most part, if you went through the study guide and did it all, then you have enough knowledge to answer all of the questions on the test. Now, some of the tests might have some questions that did not appear on the study guide, but just the content of the study guide and the resources that we provided they're gonna help you answer even the questions that maybe you didn't see on the study guide. For the most part, though, just to be clear, most of the questions that are on the study guide are going to be on the test as well, or questions that maybe we specifically talked about. We talked about them for a reason, so
I
make
would
sure
say,
you
yeah, going over the study guide is not a waste of time, right? Go
know,
like
not at
going
all.
over the study guide. Now, always like we can't everything that's on the study guide, it can't always fit into the test. So
Correct.
you might feel like I studied a couple things that weren't on the test, but they were on the study. Well, that's always going to happen because not everything, I can't possibly test you on everything that we've learned in an entire unit. I have to pick and choose. But I will tell you, like this right here, this is Mr. Padilla, would you agree?
Yes.
This is helpful right here, these essential questions.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, really quickly before we go, because we're coming up on about an hour since we finally got started. We did say that I was gonna go back and look at count the questions, right? So I have I'm looking at map questions.
Mhm.
And there's one kind of okay, if we're talking about like draw on the map, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh,
There were
wow.
10. So there were 10. And now this could all change. Like this could change. Although the test, as it stands right now, the test is pretty okay. It's pretty close to where it is now. It's pretty close to where it's going to be.
Mhm.
So let me just update this just to make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information. 20 points written response. That hasn't changed.
Correct.
10 map questions, right? Like draw on the map, which then leaves 30. No, 20. Am I doing that math? 20 points written response. 10 points map questions because it's 10 times 1,
Yep.
and then 20 multiple choice questions. That's a total of 50 points on the exam. There you go. That's my final answer. It could vary. I mean, I might add an 11th map question, or I might drop it down to 9, right? But for the most part, that's going to be the breakdown in case you're wondering, like, what is the test going to look like?
Yep.
Okay. Uh, I think you should post the study guide answers because you give us the study resources, but what if we don't get the answer right? Oh, okay. Well, the chipmunk plays. We I think Mr. Padilla and I like we talked about all just to be clear, like I hear what you're saying now. Like, can you please give us all the answers? We went over a lot of these answers in class. Like I feel like Mr. Padilla, we've talked all about push-pull factors.
Yep.
Okay. Um, I think we can crank this out. Which 5 states were carved out of Oregon territory? Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. Let me double check that to make sure I got it right. Yep, it's right there. Washington, Oregon, Idaho. This is a bit of Montana and a bit of Wyoming right there. Okay. Why were families interested in moving to Oregon? We already talked about that. Why did the mountain men? We already talked about that. Those are push-pull factors. Who were the first? We already talked about number 4. Describe travel along the Oregon Trail. Know the dangers that settlers faced. That was, I don't know how you could get the wrong answer on that. Like that, we learned about that extensively.
Hmm.
Appleton family, one family's journey, the Ed puzzle. Like I don't need to go over that. Which 4 countries had claims to the land in the 1800s? We talked about this in some classes, but not all. The 4 countries: the United States, Great Britain, Spain, Russia. What 2 countries jointly occupied it by 1818? Great Britain, the United States. And what boundary line was set in 1846? Already talked about that, 49th parallel. Push and pull factors, we already talked about that. Um, why were Americans moving? We already talked about the push pull factors into Texas.
Yep.
The leader of the main Texas Army, Sam Houston, commander of the Alamo Forces, William Travis. We already talked about number 4. Describe what happened at the Alamo. You watched it. You watched it in the movie, and then you also learned about it again in the Ed Puzzle, the Texas War for Independence. How was siege warfare? We talked about this in some classes, Mr. Padilla, right? Like it's the idea that you have a like usually a larger army kind of surrounding a smaller walled area, a city, a fort, and you kind of surround them and you just sort of like wait them out. That's siege warfare. That's what the Mexicans did to the Texians at the Alamo. Define annex: to peacefully take over a piece of land. Why didn't the United States slavery? We've gone over that plenty of times in class. And then number 9 is totally like a your opinion type of question. Um, why do you think the Texans declare like that's just that's kind of your opinion. Um, so I don't need to spend too much time on that. Who built the first Spanish mission in California? Junipero Serra. Describe how the Native Americans were treated at the missions. Oh, Mr. Padilla, I will say this. The Native Americans treatment, they were not treated well. And they were
Yes.
treated basically almost like enslaved labor. But what we determined, remember, Mr. Padilla, we
Yes.
determined that there was not sufficient information given in the materials. And so I'm going to cross that off. It's still important, but it's not going to be on the test. So I'm crossing it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why we already talked about that. Slavery. We already talked about 4, 5, 6, 7. Where in California was gold discovered? In Coloma, California, right outside of Sacramento. Who were the 49ers? Besides the losing football team yesterday. That's not the historical definition. The 49ers were uh, the usually young men who went out to California seeking gold uh, during and after 1849. You know what? I'm going to go ahead. Meteoric. We took that off the test, right, Mr. Padilla?
I think we might have kept
Yeah,
it.
we did. We took that off because we didn't have a chance to talk about the word meteoric. It's a great
Okay.
word, but I'm not going to put it on the test. And
Okay.
then finally, what challenges do pioneer women face? That was in the pioneer women reading in the gallery walk. Read it or watch the video.
Mhm.
Okay. Mr. Padilla, guess what? We went over every single item on the study guide as requested by the Chipmunk Place.
Here we go.
Did any
Question now.
final? Oh, Alessandro he's poor Alessandro. He's the Blooket froze. So after we're done, I'll post a new Blooket. And for all those of you who are, if you're trying to play the Blooket and it's freezing, then what I'm gonna do is I am going to drop this. Let me just show you right now because I don't. If you're all about the Blooket, and yes, you can be about the Blooket. Don't spend too much time on the Blooket.
Mhm.
I will post, Mr. Padilla. I'm sharing this now, right? I'm sharing the
Yes.
Google Classroom. I'm
Yes.
going to post it. I'm going to create a new one. It's going to take me a couple minutes, but I will post it in all classes in Manifest Destiny full resources so that you have a new Blooket to play. There you go.
Perfect.
Okay. Uh, Chipmunk plays. The front had push and pull factors, but the back does too.
Yeah, he's talking about the essential question.
Oh, yeah. No, I think, look, the Oregon Country, Mormon Trail, California Gold Rush, California Missions. We already talked about, right?
Mhm.
Mr. Padilla, correct me if I'm wrong. We talked about the
Yes.
push pull factors almost an hour ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, if in case Chipmunk's asking some good questions tonight.
Yes.
Uh Logan says you just saved my grade. That yeah, no, that's fair. I know push and pull factors are on here twice, but if you haven't yet figured out, push and pull factors are they're kind of a big deal, right?
Yes.
Kind of a big deal. So in case you haven't figured that out. Okay, Mr. Padilla, it is now past an hour.
Yes.
We have now gone yeah, past an hour. Thank you. And so I'm just going to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. Padilla. Mr. Padilla, this is like normally I'm on YouTube all by myself here. I normally would have a family member like moderating the chat,
Hmm.
but certainly I don't have anybody on YouTube. So this was, hey, snaps, some throw some love in the chat for Mr. Padilla because like this is let me tell you, this is so much better. This is so much nicer and easier having two teachers on as opposed to just the one. So uh Logan's like one more hour. And then AJ says, what sources are the ones that would be the most helpful in the test? AJ, the ones that we've already talked about the last hour.
Yeah.
But if I were going to, I will say this just in closing, because I do want to close this because like we're both like we got stuff to do. And you have stuff to do too. You got to study. But Mr. Padilla, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
If I'm on here, right? If I'm here and I got here because I clicked on it, full resources, I clicked right here and I got here. If
Hmm.
I were going to focus my energies, my time and my energies on like two things, two things besides the study guide, obviously.
Yeah.
Mexican War primary sources,
Yep.
Gold Rush missions, Mormons, women. Either read the sources, go over your notes from class, watch these two videos.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and the
Yeah.
study guide, of course. But those, AJ, that's my uh that's my advice.
Yeah. And go over the map for sure.
Okay. Uh and then AJ, please, I've asked so many times. Was that did I finally answer your question? Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, AJ, for your patience. Okay. I think we are now done, Mr. Padilla. Stick around, Mr. Padilla, stick around. I'm gonna shut down the YouTube live. I'll shut down the live stream. But thank you so much for being here. Students, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully you'll find this, you'll take the test and you'll be like, that was an hour and 9 minutes well spent. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and this is yeah, Dylan's asking. I think that's you, Dylan, DD10. The longest live. This might be the longest live that I've done, at least in a long time. And you can check my channel. You can see, like, go to the lives on the channel. Most of them are about an hour, maybe a little bit under an hour. This one for sure. This is, I think this could be record setting. Okay. Mr. Ippolito and Mr. Padilla's history students, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to wave goodbye to you. And I'm going to end the live stream. We'll see you in class next time. Bye.
Bye.
And